Thank you, Leela. And thanks to all of you. What an amazing day. And how wonderful it is to be with you now to offer this keynote, just these brief words. You know, I have a daughter, and these glasses are problematic. Now I can see you, but if I need to read, I need to put on the glasses. So I've got to work that out. So I have a daughter, and when she was 4, she was so excited about turning 5 because she could tell people, I'm the whole hand, all 5 fingers. So it's exciting because now our conference is 2 whole hands, right? 2 whole hands, like put them up, give it up for Ted. So thank you again, Leela, Carrie, and Maya, and the incredibly committed planning committee. I've served on that committee before, and I know how much work it is. So thank you all for putting this together. It's phenomenal, and I know the sessions and the poster sessions have been great, and there's lots of great learning and deepening taking place this weekend. I'd like to also acknowledge my fellow C-Mind board members, Dr. Oliver Hill and Dr. Dave Levy, if you would just stand up so we can acknowledge you as board members with the Center for Contemplative Mind and Society. Thank you. So good to be here and to serve with all of you. I also want to exercise a bit of my privilege and acknowledge some friends who came just to support me, and it is just really wonderful to have them here. Paula Lightsey, Ife Leonard, Dr. Velma Cobb, and my goddaughter, Perdella Jean-Baptiste, who are sitting here at the first table. Thank you so much, and my good friend Jen Cannon. Great to be here. One other thing I want to say about C-Mind is, you know, I've been to a few of these mindfulness and contemplative type of events, and C-Mind is the one organization that really puts forward voices and faces in this arena that you wouldn't otherwise see. People of color, people of different life orientations that don't get recognized or celebrated for leading this work. And so I'd also like to recognize Dr. Vita Goller from Spelman, who delivered a wonderful keynote this summer at the Author Zion's lecture series. I'd like to also recognize Dr. Camila Majid, who led yesterday's retreat, pre-conference retreat. She just walked in. Thank you, sis. Dr. Monica Son, Dr. Keir Messer, Professor Katya Derico, and Dr. Vaishali Mamgain. Will you all please stand? This is the dream team for this year, and it is really an honor. Thank you. It's really an honor to continue the conversation around contemplative pedagogy and what it can do for us and how it can transform our institutions and our society, because I believe that is what we're being called to do at this time. So just a little about me. I'm from Washington, D.C. I'm a cultural anthropologist. A lot of my work is focused on applied anthropology and using knowledge about people and the order and the meaning that they make of their lives to address issues like housing, gentrification, urban youth development, health, survivorship of breast cancer, and a number of things. So as you know, I'm a board member for C-Mind, and also I sit on the board of the Mindfulness in Education Network. And I'm the curator for a website called Wisdom from the Mat. And we have a few contributions on that website. I've done lots of stuff in urban youth education. Did spend some time in the Gambia, West Africa, working with young people there. And I am also an initiated priest in my tradition, the Yoruba tradition from West Africa. I was initiated in Washington, D.C. And that is one of the aspects that really informs my contemplative work quite a bit, along with family and culture, my African pilgrimage, the time that I spent in the Gambia, jazz, gospel, and soul music, Black nationalism, Pan-Africanism, liberation, dance, drums, and celebration. And so very quickly about the Orisha belief system or the Yoruba belief system, there are sort of 4 foundational concepts that are really important to me and that inform the way I engage personally with contemplative pedagogy and also with my students. And that's not to say that I teach religion, but these concepts inform the exercises and the practices that I do with them. First of all, this idea of Ashe, the notion that we all have a bit of the divine creator within us, and we all have the ability to make manifest those things that we desire, those things that are for our highest good. We all have Ashe. Individuals, animals, plants, which is why we can use plants to heal, to shift energy, to change conditions, even earth, air, fire, water. Those things also, those elements also have Ashe. Ancestors also have Ashe. Our loved ones who have crossed over into the other realm. We don't retire our ancestors. They keep working. And our belief is that on that other side, they manipulate things and make things happen for us and bring blessings and lessons and understandings to us because they have access to wisdom that we do not have. And so through dreams, through intuition, through insights, a number of means we are blessed with that information, and we continue to develop that relationship. Ori is another concept that is really important in this tradition, and Ori says that before you became human, you chose your destiny. Now this can be problematic, right? Because some of us live lives that are filled with suffering and sorrow and grief and pain. But through understanding of one's Ori, through social action, through ritual, through community work, we can sort of influence destiny. It's a very, very complex term. But what I like about it most especially is it says that each of us, just as we each have Ashe, we are each divine. We have a higher purpose. And there's lots of talk these days about, I want to find my calling, my purpose, right? I appreciate that this belief system also has that understanding within it. It's much more layered. I'm doing a very, very quick explanation of it, just to kind of give you a tiny bit of grounding. And then nature. So we are new to the planet as human beings. Nature is much older than we are. And because nature has intelligence, we believe that communing with trees and bodies of water and mountains and wind and animals can bring healing and alignment and greater purpose and meaning into our lives. And so these are just a few really fundamental elements of this belief system that really enlivens me and teaches me and helps me do my work. I was in Dr. Sohn's presentation earlier, and she made a really astute observation that academics can talk, a lot. It's kind of easy for us to do that, right? And it is easy, we can go on and on. And one of the things that I like to do is sing. And I would like to invite you to engage in a singing practice with me this evening. When I first started coming to this conference, I was like, man, all this quiet and all this breathing, can we be contemplative in other ways? Can we dance? Can we mix it up a little bit? And there is space for that, and I've seen some of that. And so I'm here to just bring a little bit of that. My mother transitioned June 4th, 2018. She began her journey to the realm of ancestorhood, an incredible influence in my life, as mothers are. And so I have been going through the process of grieving and missing her, and I have been grieving well, allowing space for reflection and tears and listening for her instructions. And mothers show up in dreams, my goodness. So the relationship is still there. This is my Father Melvin Coghill over here on the left, and my spiritual mother, Mother Taylor, who transitioned a couple of years ago, and some of my colleagues, my contemplative colleagues. This picture was taken right here in Florence at the Sojourner Truth statue, and then my daughter and some friends. And so this practice is a very simple song that some of you would have heard. It's one that the melody is one that we sing in many black churches, but I've changed the words, I've modified them just a bit. So there are many people who support our being here today, ancestors, but also family members and real people, like people who processed our travel requests and people who approved those things, you know, TAs and graduate students who may have helped us with our classes, folks who are watching our children, who are caring for our aging parents, who are watering our plants, right? So I'd just like to invite you to bring to mind, bring to heart those individuals who support you and who allow you to be here, who allow you to be here fully. And the song is very simple. It is, thank you, life. Thank you, life. Thank you, life. I just want to thank you, life. And if you want to replace life with something else, you may absolutely do so. So, join in the singing when you feel ready, but I will invite every voice in the room into this exercise. Thank you, life. Thank you, life. Thank you, life. I just want to thank you, life. Thank you, life. Thank you, life. Thank you, life. I just want to thank you, life. One more time. Thank you, life. Thank you, life. Oh, thank you, life. I just want to thank you, life. Thank you so much. You sound good. Give yourself some. Anyone who knows me knows that I am a fan of the ultimate earth, wind, and fire. Yes. So this is Maurice White, co-founder of Earth, Wind, and Fire. But Rachel Bagby says that we need to liberate our voices. Because when we hold and we constrict and we don't speak truth and we don't say what we have to say, we aid in the oppressive act. So liberate the voice. Sing out, sing up, sing loud. Let people hear and know that you are here. So let's do it one more time. Thank you, life. Let me hear you now. Thank you, life. Oh, keep singing. Thank you, life. I just want to thank you, just want to thank you. One more. I just want to thank you, life. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. You ready now? So, I began working on this keynote several months ago, like around May or so, and then my mom transitioned in June, and I had to put it down for a bit and deal with that and go through a process. And so it's interesting because the person that stands before you to deliver a few words today is really in some ways different from that person. There has been a growth, a heartbreak, and a healing, and a questioning that I have been engaged in. What is important to me? Why am I engaged in this work of contemplative pedagogy and mindfulness? Why am I in this stuff? What is it that I am really to contribute? What is it that I really want to see? And I can honestly say that what I'm working toward is creating a more humane world. I am really working toward that, and I think many of us are. And so I just want to offer a few ideas about what a humane institution might look like. And of course, I don't have all of the answers. You know that. We together don't have all of the answers. There are many answers. But what I'd like to provide this evening is maybe 3 things that I think we can focus on, that if we really invite them in, they can help us create the humane institutions that I believe most of us want to work within. I asked a few of my friends, a few of my colleagues from different institutions, what is a humane institution for them? And Dr. Maria Hamilton Abegunde says that it's one where people are not afraid to be seen or heard, where people are willing to engage in dialogue and debate to really get the answers that they seek. It's also a place where the whole person can show up, and a place where people don't just occupy seats. Well, in order for these things to happen, institutions have to be safe. They have to be welcoming. They have to truly be places that invite this deeper kind of exploration. But I think we need to do some things in order to transform our institutions into humane institutions. And I'll tell you, because I am a Black woman in America, this issue of race is very problematic and hurtful and disruptive and enraging to me. And it is an issue that I spend a lot of my time addressing. In some ways, I believe it is one of America's original sins. And the extent to which we commit ourselves to dismantling and destroying racism is an indication of our willingness to dismantle and completely destroy other forms of oppression. I understand intersectionality. I do. I do think it is important. But I think some real concerted, intentional energy needs to be devoted to this issue of race, the racial hierarchy, because it informs each and every aspect of this existence here. All experiences are mitigated through this construct of race. And so it's not an either or, it's a both and, but the race thing is very, very deep. Becoming aware of racially dominant and subordinated group dynamics is fundamental to transforming habits of racial harm, says Dr. King. We won't recognize these dynamics if we look solely through the lens of the good individual. Instead, habits of harm are readily discernible and important to discern through the lens of racial group identities. We all know that in the past couple of years, actually, we've heard a lot of incidences of racial acts occurring on campuses, acts towards African American students. Even at my own alma mater, American University, just last year, a young black woman was beginning her first day as the new student government president. And in various places around campus, there was found bananas and nooses with the letters AKA, standing for her sorority, Alpha Kappa Alpha, an historic sorority for black women. A couple of years ago, some students, I believe at Kansas State University, painted their faces black and made a video of themselves. These things have been going on a long time. We can see them more, we can understand to some extent their prevalence because of social media, but they've been going on for a very long time, and to some extent they're not new. They're an extension of the racial narrative that we have lived with and lived under for many years, and I say that given these challenging times we are living in, the difficulty around hearing the truth and speaking the truth, the challenges that our democracy is facing, we need to speak up. We need to journey with more courage in academia. In order to do that, in order to journey with that courage, however, we have to face some fears. We have to question some false beliefs that are running rampant in our time. The false beliefs that say some people in our society are valued over others. The false belief that says history and trauma are no longer relevant. We need to acknowledge these things. We need to acknowledge our individual role and the structural and systemic factors as well. And we need to commit to dismantling these things. Now, to some extent, I'm pretty sure that I'm speaking to a safe audience and many folks who think like I do. And the folks who really are perpetuating these ideas in our time, devaluing black students, black faculty, black staff, devaluing others who are not a member of the majority, they may not be in this room, which means that our charge is to be courageous so that we can confront those individuals who affect policies and decisions and so forth. We have to have the courage to speak up in those instances where we see individuals being assaulted based on this notion of race and other types of difference in social identities. The Humane institution is a place where mind, spirit, and body are welcomed, nurtured, challenged, and provided an opportunity to grow. It's where people can reach their highest potential, but this cannot occur in a space when students are afraid. This cannot occur in a space where students are not valued, where faculty is not valued. The assaults are continuous, questioning the legitimacy of certain faculty members. I recall reading an article in which a black woman was at a faculty dinner, and she was dressed professionally like others in her department, and she was asked 3 times, not once, not twice, but 3 times, "Are you going to bring out more hors d'oeuvres?" What is it that disallows us from even thinking that a black body in a certain space could occupy certain roles, or roles other than subservient roles? What is it that makes people question the legitimacy or appropriateness of a black body on a campus, a predominantly white college campus? Black students are being emotionally assaulted for being black on campus, for sleeping on campus, for walking across campus. This is a problem, and I think it is a problem for all of us. it's a problem for all of us. So what does embracing fear have to do with becoming a humane institution? Because sometimes we're afraid to question the assumptions and misperceptions that we have of other people. Sometimes we're afraid to speak up when we see a snide comment or when we are noticing patterns happening in our institutions or in our neighborhoods or in our community groups. We're afraid to speak up. And we can't allow that fear to stop us. I've heard, feel the fear and do it anyway. These times call for us to do that, to feel the fear and do it anyway. They call for us to have these challenging conversations. They call for all of us to interrogate our understandings and misunderstandings about race. Our group identities, our racial group identities, are very complex. We all have been trained to fear, fight, and ignore each other out of greed, avoidance, hatred, or indifference. We all have history of wounds, and we all have the capacity to transform. I believe that. But we have to be willing to do the work. We have to be willing to do the work. We have to be willing to address these notions of privilege, of fragility, of even ignorance. Well, I don't know much about that, and that's not my struggle, that's not my fight. I think it belongs to everybody. We have to address the internalized superiority and inferiority that this racial hierarchy has left us to negotiate and deal with. And we also, I think, have to examine how our contemplative approaches in our classes might produce different experiences for our students from varying racial and ethnic backgrounds. Sometimes the practices or the offerings that we want to share with our students may be problematic or challenging for some students because of their racial or ethnic backgrounds. I think we also have to look at and really examine what is the root of some of those practices. What is the root of them for us as educators, as people employed in higher ed? The things that we may think are so wonderful and enlightening, and this is going to help, they may not be. We need to look at our approaches, right? We don't want to further the colonial machine or the oppressive machine by imposing or presenting practices in a particular way. These are some deep questions that we sometimes have to ask ourselves. Right? Good intentions, it's not always enough. So it's a matter of how deep are we willing to go? How much work are we willing to do? But I fear that the state of our world and the state of our human community is really at risk if we are not willing to do this work. So I'd like to share with you just a little bit about the work that I do on my campus at the University of the District of Columbia. I teach in our Crime, Justice, and Security Studies program. Our campus is a public institution, predominantly Black. And in my work, I prepare students to become youth development workers, parole officers, law enforcement officers. And so I have this really deep sense of commitment to Black young people, to Black youth. I'm a Black mother. I was a Black youth. And what we see and what we understand, and we hear about this all the time, right? The over-incarceration of black young people, the disproportionate minority contact. And the Hayward Burns Institute says that even 100 years since our youth justice system was found, young black people, there's still disparities between how black youth are treated and other youth of color are treated in our criminal justice system versus white young people. And this is a trend. It's not only in the justice system, but when we look at other aspects of society, we see these problematic realities. Black youth are more than 4 times as likely to be incarcerated than white youth for the same sort of offense. Native American youth more than 3 times as likely, and Latino youth twice as likely to be arrested. So why is this? Dr. Monique Morris, I love her work. She says that black girls often have to negotiate in schools their own femininity because historically black girls have been seen as sassy or angry or defiant, older than they are. And so the ways in which they express their femininity is problematic for many educators in our school systems. Implicit racial and gender bias impacts how their behaviors are read and how they are responded to. Black children are almost 4 times as likely to be suspended in preschool than white children. How do you suspend a child in preschool? And for what? And why is it that black children are suspended almost 4 times as likely as white children in preschool? This very interesting study used eye tracking technology where teachers were, their eye movements were tracked. They were told to look for the problem children or the trouble behavior in the classroom, a mixed classroom of black girls and black boys and white girls and white boys. And they found that overwhelmingly white teachers looked at black males for that problematic or troubling behavior. And sadly, black teachers did as well. And so this is why we have to interrogate these internalized notions of superiority and inferiority. We have to address them in order to dismantle this racist machine. Black boys are viewed as older and less innocent than whites. And in some studies I've also seen where black people, black patients in hospitals, are seen as being better able to tolerate pain. This is the language, right? But really, they're not seen as fully human, individuals who can feel pain and be hurt and be uncomfortable. And so their requests for pain medication, their requests for attention are ignored. This is a function of racism. And as my mom, God rest her soul, used to say, we have to call a spade a spade. What it represents is an historic dehumanization and devaluation of black people, particularly black youth. You may recall this instance where Dejaria Becton was at a pool party, I believe it was in Texas, with other young people. And I would play the video for you, but I think it's a bit too traumatic for our purposes this evening. But the white police officers are shouting, they have their guns drawn, and they're telling the kids, go home, go home. They're only shouting at the black kids. It wasn't just black kids there. And this officer is sitting on this young 15-year-old girl, assaulting her beautiful body. And she is screaming, somebody call my mother, somebody call my mother. Why? Because she doesn't know if she's going to see her mother after this. This is a reality. This is a reality that goes far back. Some of you may know about this case of Emmett Till, who was accused of whistling at a white woman in a store in the South. His mother sent him down to be with family for the summer. He didn't come home alive. This is hard stuff. but these are our children. And we have to question why society protects some children and not all children. We have to question why society sees the innocence and the beauty and the promise and the potential of some children and not all children. So my work centers around Blackness, mindfulness, justice, and healing for young people. And in that work, we address these factors of institutional and individual racism, internalized oppression, imposter syndrome, colorism, one of the stepchildren of racism, negative self-talk, ACEs, traumatized histories, and neighborhoods. Our young people bring all of these and more, along with their gifts and their promises, to our classrooms. The research project that I am leading with my colleagues combines mindfulness, restorative justice, and youth development to curb youth violence in DC. And so this is a 3-year endeavor, and it's been wonderful thus far. We're going into our 2nd year, and it is a community-based participatory research initiative. And so we've been working very closely with the community to figure out the best place to implement this intervention and the best group to work with and such. So we will be implementing this in the summer of 2019 at 2 parks and recreation centers in the district. And so restorative justice philosophy and practices is really the center of the initiative, because restorative justice says we live in community with one another. We are interdependent and interconnected, and what happens to me affects you. And if I have harmed you, then it is my obligation to correct that, to address that harm. We think it's really important for Black youth to have this language around equity and anti-racism that we all understand, or many of us understand. We think it's empowering for them to understand this and to have the mindfulness and contemplative skills to restore themselves as they are walking through the world and interacting within a racist construct. The initiative also includes protective factors. College students will mentor young people. We will go on retreats. There will be other adults that will be available to support and engage these young people, because for me, if mindfulness is so powerful, if these contemplative approaches are so powerful and so useful in helping us gain deeper awareness of ourselves and the social world, then we need to be applying this medicine to our youth. And opportunities for leadership and creativity. So beyond our own individual well-being, the time has now come for us to ask, how can these approaches move the needle forward? How can they move our society into a more humane and equitable society? Of course, we want to support the social and emotional health of young people. We want to influence their attitudes and behaviors around violence, but we also want to see more culturally relevant, equity-focused mindfulness and contemplative programming for young people. There's some wonderful programs out here now, thank you. Wonderful programs, but are they informed by the culture of the young people that they're serving? Are young people invited to create their own practices? Are there conversations about what do you do to center, to still? What did your grandmother do? My mother crocheted. My grandmother prayed, right? My aunties took walks or baked. Can we not use those already existing cultural practices or family ways and support them and build some supports around them so that they can be very accessible and healing and transformative for our young people? Or can we only create approaches kind of in a vacuum and then market them to school systems? We have to question that as well. We have to question that. How far do we go? Our program seeks to shift the power dynamic, giving young people the language that they need so they can be more knowledgeable and armed, if you will, internally armed to function better in this society. Young people will inform our research design, and what we'd like to see is these sorts of approaches implemented broadly throughout our DC Department of Parks and Recreation Services. And so some of the practices encompass an affirmative storytelling, the I want for you practice that Dr. Sohn, it comes from you, right? What I want for you. Jazz meditation, some of you know that I use John Coltrane, Ahmad Jamal, and other jazz artists in my meditations. This is a way to show young black, this is, black youth, we created this. This is our contribution among many others. Let's use this to go deeper, to heal ourselves, to transform ourselves. Vision boards, black youth visualization, select hip-hop materials, body acceptance practices. Dr. Angela Rose Black with Mindfulness for the People says, who gets to be well? She asked this question because she was doing work in mindfulness in universities, but she herself was not well because she was always confronted with this racist and racial machine that compromised her health. So who gets to be well? I think we all get to be well. We all deserve to be restored and healed. We all deserve to have our culture affirmed and to be empowered. So I'm running out of time, but I want us to do this little practice. I think these times call for courageous acts. They call for courage. And I'd like to invite you to consider how you might act more courageously in the act of creating a more humane institution. What courageous action might you be willing to take? Individual action and collective action. So you can think about in what ways is your institution right now humane? You can shout these out. Use your best professor voice. And tell me, what are the ways that your institution, you would say, is now being a humane institution, a place where people can really thrive and show up, bring their full selves? Which, it's not at all. Come on, John, you're there. He's making it difficult. I hear you. You know, something I didn't share is that, so I teach undergrad at the institution where I did my undergraduate work. And it was a former professor of mine who invited me to come back to take this visiting assistant professor job. I was like, okay, that sounds cool. I like doing that. And within 2 weeks of my being there, she stopped speaking to me. We had this kind of conflict, and we shared an office. And our relationship was severed. And I apologized, and I acknowledged that I had made some missteps. She refused to heal the relationship. I'm sad to say this was a black woman. The relationship never healed. And I had to sit in the office with her until I was assigned elsewhere. And I remember the visceral fear that I had going to the elevator when I saw her there. I remember feeling nauseous and anxious about going to work. And I remember that sadly, my institution did little to protect me or to support me. And I've learned since then that many of my colleagues have had very painful experiences in higher education. The tenure and promotion process. It's your work and the work that you do alone. High impact journals, this community stuff that you're doing, it's not quite as valuable to us. Right? Conflicts between colleagues and department chairs. All manner of pain, sexual assaults, all sorts of things. It's horrendous. We have to change these institutions. So we have to look for these spaces of humanity on our campuses. And we have to thrive, and we have to contribute to them, and we have to use our practices to shore us up, to give us courage to confront those who keep these institutions from serving everybody, from being welcoming spaces for everybody. And yes, maybe that does sound ideal or idealistic, even the microphone. But it's what we have to do. Are there any examples of humane institutions?
Indigenous student art.
Indigenous student art. Thank you. Any others? Work it out. Again, Nita? Courage to teach. Retreat, yes. You have that on your campus? Wonderful.
Classes are in circle. Classes are in circle.
Circle? Thank you. Okay. Yes.
Mindfulness, stress reduction in the urban environment.
Beautiful. Mindfulness, stress reduction in the urban environment. Beautiful. In what ways can your institution be more humane? Let's think about how the institution treats students of color, queer students, Muslim students. Let's think of the way the institution promotes faculty of color or does not. Let's think of the ways in which the institution treats the individuals who clean up the classrooms and the folks who take care of the grounds. Let's think of the ways that the institution imposes meetings and committees and obligations that interfere with our teaching and that interferes with our family time. Let's think of the ways in which institutions demand that we be there in the morning or late at night when we have other obligations beyond the institution. What are some of the other ways that the institution can be more humane? Let's think about salary. Okay, that's another presentation. I was appalled to learn that social science faculty only get like a percentage of what engineering faculty or business faculty earn. These are big tasks. But we're the people for the job. This is the work. It isn't just about our own individual feeling good. It isn't about our own individual publications and books. It's beyond that. Our humanity, our ability to fully thrive and live and have a world for our children and grandchildren, I say, is at risk. It's in jeopardy. So we've really got to step it up with our work. So I invite you to just think about what other courageous action you can take, what other risks you can take on your campus to make a more humane institution. And I know that that is also tricky, right? Because we've got these different relationships with our institution. Some of us are adjunct, some of us are part-time, right? And it may not be as safe to take those risks, which is why it's important to have friendships and allies. So embracing the fear, embracing the friendships and the allies who can support us, and this is where a lot of your allies may come from, and embracing hope. Even with all of the challenging and depressing stuff I mentioned, I am not hopeless. Just the opposite. The work that I have to do, my love and commitment for liberation, for freedom, for healing, for my children, propels me forward. It gives me hope to move forward. And I'm certain that it does the same for you. So after today, I invite you to consume material that can feed you in this work. I left the word off there, but you guys are really smart. Call on your courage to continue to go deep. Continue to go deep with this, right? Connect with allies. Make changes where you are among your peers. Some of Dr. Angela Roseblack's work has to do with helping people understand the exhaustion that people of color and others do when we feel it's our obligation to teach non-people of color. Or, to teach whites. I mean, white people know that they're white, right? It's exhausting, it's frustrating, and we are allies, right? But we need whites to have these conversations in your spaces, because we are always having these conversations, right? And question everything. Even as individuals who meditate and who go deep and who have writing practices and moving practices, we still need to go deep because it is all around us, right? So question the assumptions, thoughts, values, actions. Speak up and act up. And this may look different for each of us, but we can still do it. We can speak up and we can act up. Here are just a few noted scholars who write on these issues of race and contemplative pedagogy and mindfulness, and there are many others. So I encourage you to look up their work. And I thank you for this time. There is, I'm not sure we'll be able to do this other thing because I'm not certain that the sound was addressed, but I can take a couple of questions. It's good. Thank you, Maya. It's good. So I would like to play some music for this last practice after a couple of questions, if there are any. And I'll be around, so you can ask me questions at any time. But part of this work is also knowing who you are authentically and what this work is for you authentically. And for me, it's about saving Black children. It's about saving and strengthening Black families. And so yes, I speak about Blackness. I speak about race because it's real and it's important. And people's lives are being affected by this. Not just the lives of Black people, but all of our lives. And so I think it's important to address it, for all of us to address it. That's my stake in this. And so I invite you to also explore what is authentic and true and real for you in this contemplative work. And then act up, speak up, make it happen. But have the courage to do that. So I'm mindful that we are at 6:35 and I'm supposed to be done at 6:30. So what I'm going to do is play a little bit of music by Earth, Wind & Fire, the best band of all time. And I'm going to come down and I hope that you will just smile and move your shoulders and we can talk and just keep on doing the work. And thank you so much for having me this evening.